Cool. How's it going, man?
I'm good, brother. Good,
Good.
good. Just
Yeah.
trying to I guess keep myself healthy, getting ready for the race here in like 6 weeks. So
Oh yeah, when is that?
it's April 16th.
Nice.
So
How long?
I was gonna do a full for that, but I'm gonna just do another half, see if I can kind of bring my time down and aim for a full in the fall. So just kind of train smart instead of trying to go for the full beans, I guess. So I've got a lady that I work with who's like a female professional triathlete. So she's pretty awesome. And so kind of just going through like a full program with her throughout the summer, all that good stuff.
Nice. So how long you been running? Because you were pretty like badass bodybuilder there for a while, like super jacked.
Yeah, dude. Well, I appreciate that. To me, just always how I looked. I never thought it was anything special. But so probably for about 3 years now, I guess like beginning of 2020 is when I'm sure you're familiar with Nick Bear. I know a lot of people are. I kind of saw his transformation from being a meathead to an Iron Man athlete and was like, hey, maybe I can give that a shot. So just slowly from there, kind of started trying to incorporate that style of training. I would love to say that it would just like went amazing when I first got into it, right? But no, I mean, going from somebody who's never done that before and carrying a lot more mass, like you have to just go through a lot of like background work on like, all right, how do I even run correctly and not hurt myself by carrying around more size like that? Because it's so much easier to. So
Yeah,
yeah,
for
it's been a
sure.
long process, kind of get fine tuning all of it. But it's one of those things that's like I think running's much more cathartic than any other style of like exercise in the sense that in the morning it's so nice to like get out the door, just throw your shoes on. It's still dark outside. Like it's kind of like just your time to like rest and think. I don't even listen to music when I'm going 9 times out of 10. So
Yeah, in Texas it's like that. Here in Michigan, it's awful.
that's true. Yeah,
I know.
for
Whenever I watch
sure.
like Nick Bear talk about that, I'm like, no, it's awful here. Like
You're hating your life the entire time,
yeah,
right?
that's deliberate cold exposure. Like I've literally gone outside, like, fuck, I don't need a cold shower. Like, why would I need a cold shower? This is awful.
See, that is why I'm jealous of you guys, though, because I think about that sometimes. I'm like, man, if I ever want to get a cold plunge, I'm gonna have to find somewhere to put it. I'm like, up there, you could literally just walk outside and have something you put water in and let that freeze overnight and then break it
True.
up and you'd be good to go.
You know what? I talked to Jason Khalipa. I was on his podcast and I was like, I don't have a cold plunge, but I guess I could do a cold shower. And he's like a huge advocate of cold
Mhm.
plunge. And he was saying that he feels like the shower is harder. When I thought about it, I was like, I think so too, because you know that you're in a warm, comfortable area and it's warm usually, and then you have to deliberately reach out and like turn that to cold, and you can change that at any moment. Like,
Yep.
it's so much easier to just dive in and you have no choice. Like I could dive into a cold body of water, no problem. You just go like fuck it and do it, But like having to torture myself and be the one that is the governor, I think that's harder.
And having the water continually like hit you like that too, right? And I think
That's
that's
true too.
even when I've done like, because I'll do like ice baths just for my like lower for my feet and legs sometimes. And once you get in a position, like you start to warm up, but like the second you move or there's any movement, it's like you start to feel how cold that water is again. So
Yeah.
I've wanted to start doing the shower thing, like especially at night before bed, like doing it right before bed, because they always say like getting that cold, like right before you're trying to sleep, definitely helps you wind down.
I think
So
it's the opposite though, because I think you want to get your body hot first so that you start to cool your own internal temperature down. So like a sauna or a hot shower before bed.
gotcha.
Because I would think that like the cold is best in the morning when you want to like stimulate cortisol and epinephrine, norepinephrine. So like early cold exposure, late heat exposure, I would think. I
Yep.
mean, I could be wrong.
Yep.
I'm sure we could find data for both, which
No, and
is the
you're
most confusing part about science for people, I'm sure.
right. Exactly. Is there, you can always try and manipulate data to prove your point to a
Yeah,
certain
and one study will say one thing, the other, and then there's so much minutia, people don't even understand how to read studies, which is part of the issue. I mean, even like in graduate level courses, you'll sit down and read a study for an entire semester, just picking it apart, research methods. Like it's not easy to understand studies, and most people just read an abstract and think they've read a paper. Yeah, probably
Absolutely.
not.
Well, yeah, now it's so easy for anybody to, right? Just to go online, pull something up, use it to kind of prove their point. And for most people, they never even take the time to go in and read through studies. So they normally take that as word, like, oh, if this person's saying that's how this study concludes, then hey, I'm just going to go with that. But
Exactly. There's been
go
like
ahead.
two this week that are like that. There was the drinking Coke like increases testicular size or something like that. Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
I
Please
think it
inform
was out of
me.
like, I don't know, I want to say Budapest. I don't know, it was some really like small, like third world country with like a small participant, really low level of evidence study. And media grabbed onto it like drinking Coca-Cola increases testicular size. And then we're like, no, like there's so many other studies that would suggest the exact opposite. And then there was one like, a few days ago, like xylitol causes cancer or something like that with a like a N of 8. So there's like 8 participants in that. And it was correlational, but they still hit all the headlines.
Yep.
So now
Yep.
we got people not drinking xylitol, which is calorie free, and going for Coke, so their balls will get bigger.
That I was gonna say, if that were the case, everybody in America would be walking around with huge balls then, because there must
Exactly.
be consume enough Coke to make that happen. I think I haven't watched the video yet, but Lane Norton put something out, I think, speaking about the xylitol, because he always with the like always has something on the sweeteners. And I
Yeah,
know he put that video up recently just over the long-term study of using anything artificial, and they really couldn't, like, as far as the endpoint over years, decipher if there actually was any negative health impacts or not. So
exactly. Yeah, people always they'll be like, well, this one showed that it like disrupted the gut microbiome, and we're like, okay, well, what does that mean? So like,
yeah,
I'm like, I don't really like any of the gut health stuff because I don't even think we understand what that is. Like, I liken it to like the ocean, to where we know it's there, we know it's massive, we have barely scratched the surface. And like it may be detrimental to gut health, but we can't say that conclusively right now. Like, we know that taking artificial sweeteners changed the gut microbiome. Did it change it in a good way or a bad way? We don't know. It just changed it. That's all they're saying.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. No, it's funny. I was actually listening to one of Atia's old podcasts the other day, and I think it was him and Rhonda Patrick, like one of his old episodes, and they were talking about that with just the gut microbiome and just how, like, we don't even necessarily understand like all the different bacteria, or like what even each one's mechanism of action is, or what you're actually trying to even look at when can, I guess, pinpoint what each one is. Like, it's just kind of like a crapshoot
yeah,
essentially.
it's crazy. We're just like, essentially we have more bacteria than like our own cells, and like we're basically just like a host for bacteria.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of weird to think about.
Yeah. No, my wife and I were watching some Netflix show last night that just picks like different topics. It goes into it, and it was about your skin. And just like, even when you look at your skin, like how there's tons of like different little micronisms, or microorganisms that like live on top of your skin if you actually like look at it and stuff. I'm like, it's so wild to
Yeah,
think
it
about
is
that. We are just like a host,
for
essentially.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, shit, we got a little bit off topic. We're talking about your racing and Nick Bear, which is funny. Nick Bear, I'm going to bring up that too, because I really like Nick Bear a lot. And it's funny because we just met, for those like listening, Josh and I just met like, I don't know, what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
So we're both over at Merrick Health. If you guys don't know, I'm one of the providers there. And Josh is one of our new patient care coordinators or health coach. So we both do a lot of health coaching through Merrick. But when I first saw you, I was like, this dude's like Nick Bear. And it's funny because Nick Bear, like I saw his YouTube channel not when I first started working out, but when I started getting more into like science-based working out. And we had a lot of the like similar philosophies of like, this dude's doing like macro counting. He's not just doing the chicken and rice and broccoli. And that's when, there was like Matt Ogus. I'm trying to, a few other like YouTubers that were doing like macro counting, Lane Norton, obviously. And Nick was just like just emerging. I literally think he only had a few thousand followers on YouTube, maybe like one or two. And I
Yeah.
reached out to him because he was like, you guys want my protocol, like just email me. And I went back in my like college email the other day and saw that. And it's funny because he emailed me. Now he's built an empire, which is awesome. But he sent me like his protocol when he first started out. That's before he went to like Korea for the
Yeah.
army. Yeah.
Yeah.
So super cool to watch him. I've always wondered though, like, I don't feel like he's natty, if I'm being honest, which I don't care about. And if I were him, I wouldn't bring it up. But he holds on to a lot of mass. What do you think?
Dude, that's tough with Nick because I've like debated this a lot too. Um, and like, especially when I look at his old stuff when he was like really focused on size and strength. Like, I mean, dude, he was huge
He
and
got
like
big.
very, yeah, very big and very lean. And then to make that transition in full transparency, I'm somebody who's not, I
Mhm.
used exogenous hormones when I was competing on TRT still now. And, to make then that big shift to just all endurance training and still be able to hold a lot of that, it's really hard for me to think that like there isn't something there helping him out with that,
Right.
and I know he and his wife just had a child recently. Congrats to
True.
them. And so I wonder if maybe there was a point that he did get off and transition when they were trying to have a child, because I saw him post blood work, and luteinizing hormone and FSH looked in range. And
Oh,
so I'm,
really?
yeah, maybe there was like a trans or a point after that he transitioned off, but now he's getting ready for a show again and like going down the bodybuilding route. And I'm like, I don't know, man. It's just hard. How it is being guys that are in that industry. Like that's immediately where your mind goes. It shouldn't be, but you just always.
Yeah. I
So
feel like I don't follow him too closely anymore, but it's just I've never seen him talk about it, which is cool because I wouldn't either because I get sick of everybody talking about it these days. Like I was just on a podcast with Fuad Opiod bodybuilder, and I was saying like I feel like the way that we talk about steroids now is a double-edged sword because on one side of that we've got people are doing things smarter than when you and I may have first started, which is cool. Because all I had was forums and I had like steroid.com and it would list side effects, and side effects were literally like hair loss, acne, oily skin, balls will shrivel. And I'm like, I don't care if my balls shrivel, that'll help me look bigger in another area. I'm not losing my hair. I don't have much acne. Like I'm doing good. I can take any amount of this. And then I had Boston Lloyd saying pro bodybuilders are taking 3 cc's a day. And I'm like, oh, that's what it takes. And so I was doing stupid shit, and I didn't realize what I was doing detrimental to myself. So on one end, it's better that there are people talking about it. So we know like maybe your first cycle could be like 200 milligrams of something, and you could probably exhaust that before ever going up rather than 500 right out the gate. But also now that everybody talks about it, everybody's also doing it. So you have every single like, and as soon as a kid starts lifting, it used to be like we would gather our money up for some creatine and it would be like you're excited to do your first creatine cycle, and now it's just like you start lifting, let's get on TRT. And that's another huge like thing that pisses me off is people saying TRT. I'm like, it is not TRT. TRT is testosterone replacement therapy for somebody who is no longer making adequate physiological levels of testosterone to get on and replace that. Like if you're healthy and you have a testosterone probably north of 400 nanograms per deciliter, like you're not replacing you're just using testosterone. It's like I get so upset with that. Everybody, and then it's really confusing for people because you got your influence on there saying I'm on TRT, and I'm like, no, bro, 300 milligrams a week cruising is not TRT. Like, be honest to these kids.
yeah.
Because we get guys through America all the time thinking, as soon as they don't want to go to the gym one day, or if they're with a really hot girl and they can't get it up, like, oh, I need TRT, and they just want to jump straight to that.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, but I personally like that Nick doesn't talk about it that much. Like he just puts out the work and that's what he shows. And like I could care less if he's on or not, just because this is kind of the nature of the podcast to talk about things like that. I was just like, curious, like, could you hold on to that much mass while doing that kind of training? I don't know, possibly. He did get pretty freaking small, like when you look at him,
That's
So
true. Yeah, no, I mean, because even now, he walks around at, a little over 200 pounds. But I mean, when he broke his 2 hour and 50-minute marathon this last year, I mean, he's under 190 pounds for those races. I mean, and he looks like it. I mean, you have to, I mean, even for me personally, I mean, like, you have to almost like starve tissue off yourself to get smaller like that. So
yeah,
who knows, maybe during that time period, or it was coming down to a very low dose of TRT. But more to your overarching point, I'm never overly concerned with it either because I know the work that goes into what he's doing regardless, just like
oh
you and I
yeah,
both do. So it's like, who cares, man? Because I could give anybody what he's taking or TRT, and they would never put in 60 miles a week of running, on top of resistance
right.
training. Just it wouldn't
And
happen.
I feel like, I mean, there's drugs that are great for endurance, but it not really anabolics. Like they're not amazing. Yeah, having like a baseline of testosterone in so that your training doesn't like dip your endogenous, because we know like long endurance is going to have some suppression on luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, and you may dip a little bit, so your recovery might be harmed. But honestly, like I did a lot of gear through my CrossFit days and it sucked. Like I think it negatively impacted me. Like my strength was awesome, but every time we took off on even just like a mile run, my calves would be cramping, like my back would be getting pumped. So like just the overall increased water retention and all the fluid that I had in me, it hurt. Like I couldn't imagine being an endurance athlete taking a ton of gear.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, and it's funny you say that because I actually, that CrossFit's like the other community I feel like that people always like have questions about. But yeah, even for like those people, if anybody was, I would probably like should push them to not, because it's
Yeah.
like, hey, like if anything, you should be looking at the endurance, type of drugs, your
Yeah.
EPOs, your things like that. So it just, yeah, it doesn't make much sense long term. But back to your other point earlier of just like how much stuff has changed from when you and I started. I wish I had listened to the hair loss stuff when I got into it, because it definitely, the Reaper came for me on
I've
that one.
got some like recession going on a little bit, but not too
I can't tell. I'll take
bad.
your head of hair. We can switch. But yeah, man, it's I do like how open it's talked about now. And obviously for guys like us getting to be a part of, somewhere like Merrick where we get to actually help guys do that in a healthy manner is awesome. But the thing that I worry about the most is the younger guys out there that, yeah, see it now as like, hey, I just need to hop on T at 20 years old. And like we were even talking about offline the other day, anytime there's a problem with anything, they automatically think like, oh, my hormones are screwed, I need to start manipulating things. It's like, no, that's just life sometimes. Like there are days that your sexual drive isn't going to be up to par if you didn't get good
Exactly.
sleep, or you've got all these other lifestyle factors that are possibly contributing to that downstream. And I think like that's probably the next focus. I feel like we do a great job of that, of Merrick, is like teaching people, hey, there's a lot of other things that you could be addressing here before just worrying about like your total hormone output, because there's many things that contribute to that. That's the end point of it so
For
much.
sure. Yeah, like something that drew me to Merrick was that, there's testosterone clinics on every single corner. They're like Starbucks now. Like you can go anywhere for TRT. And so I didn't want to be involved with anything that was just TRT because, it's a dime dozen. You can get that anywhere, like I said. So I liked the fact that they were like, testosterone replacement is something that we may do if warranted, but like this is your solution to, a lot of people go to the doctor only when they are like sick or have an issue. Like I've never had somebody come to me saying like, hey, I'm really healthy right now and I want to make sure I stay this way, or I'm really healthy, I want to be healthier. And it's just because the healthcare system isn't set up that way. And I understand why. Like, I know a lot of people hate on Western medicine and everything, but like, if you imagine the exorbitant costs of that, that if everybody was just always trying to optimize, and I know it, like, if we could have it that way, that would be awesome. And it's not the doctors that don't want it that way, but it's just the whole infrastructure isn't set up that way. But that is where places like Merit come in, that, if you do have the funds to pay out of pocket, which, because unfortunately insurance isn't going to cover, preventative stuff really. You can go to a place like Merrick and deal with people like you and I who have done stupid stuff first and now, have a passion for optimizing. And then we have other people who have never done stupid stuff, but have just been focused on optimizing. And I don't know, it's just cool. I like that a lot.
No, absolutely. And, it's funny you say that, because I was just telling somebody the other day, that's probably my favorite part about getting to, work with people like that, is one, helping, guys and gals not make the same dumb decisions that we did. But yeah, getting to almost like teach somebody who really is curious to learn, like, how do I keep myself healthy for the long term? Like, I'm 25, but there's no reason that that's too early for you to like start looking at things that may cause you an issue, downstream. Looking if you have super high LP little a levels, the genetic factors that are going to predispose you for heart issues down the road. Like, 15, even 5 years ago, nobody looked at really LP little a, but 15 years ago, nobody would ever think to look at those things. And then it's not addressed until you're way older, and obviously very hard to deal with at that point. So I think that's the cool part, is bringing in just the average person, like me, even, I know you're obviously medically trained, but, a lot of this was having to learn on my own, and getting to just walk others through that and bring them through their blood work. Like, hey, that's why this is important. Here are the things you can add into just either lifestyle supplement choices. Like, doesn't even have to be medicine, that you can do to, actually really positively impact your health and make sure you don't have issues down the road.
Yeah, for sure. And I think people don't like realize how much you can do naturally, and like you just brought up the CrossFit thing. And this is something that I'm allowed to talk about, because I saw Jason Khalipa both as a patient, and then I was on his podcast. And for those of you who don't know who Jason Khalipa is, he was like in the beginning of CrossFit, he was one of the, he'll be on the Mount Rushmore of CrossFit, champions. I think he won the 2008 games, if I believe it's the right year. And then he went on to, what's that?
One of the OGs.
Oh yeah, for sure, one of the OGs. And then he was, toe to toe with like Froning in all those years. Like he was awesome. And while I was doing CrossFit, I always felt like I'm not as good as them because they're doing better drugs than I have. Like I always had that in the back of my head, and it was such a cop out. But I always believed that to be true. Like, it's because they're on a ton of growth hormone. They're recovering so much. That's why they're able to do 3 workouts a day, and I'm not. Like, let me add something else in. And it's funny because every time I added something else in, I did not get any better. They stayed better than me. So years later, now I see Jason, and again, he let me talk about this openly, and I see his testosterone, and it was literally in the 400s, and it looked very natural. Luteinizing hormone, follicle-stimulating hormone were very normal. He didn't have any HDL suppression. He didn't have high estradiol. He didn't have SHBG suppression, things that we look for in somebody who's maybe used. And it doesn't mean that he had it in his past, but like, I certainly got the vibe from him, and you can always kind of tell just by, picking up little nuances, but he legitimately had no idea what I was talking about when it came to testosterone stuff. It was like he had never even known what his levels were before, and he didn't even fully understand what steroids were and what they may have done to him. And he actually, at the end, like, he was like, do you think I would benefit from being on TRT? Like, he was kind of excited about it. And I really got the idea, like, this guy's never dabbled in anything. And if you look at him, he looks like a professional bodybuilder, essentially. I mean, if you're a bodybuilding fan, you'll pick him apart easily, but he's jacked. He's more jacked than any guy would ever imagine or would love to be, and he performs very, very well. And those are all those guys. And so kind of changed my mind. I'm sure there are people out there that are doing things, but I think people like Nick Bare, Rich Froning, Matt Frazier, like, it's possible these guys are actually natural, and they just work way fucking harder than you do, because they work way harder than I ever did. And I wish that I had I thought I was working hard, but I was kidding myself, I'm sure if I spent an hour with them, I wouldn't be able to hang out. Like, and the same goes for bodybuilders. And like, we know obviously they're using the drugs, but I look at that as like the supplement. When you look at what a bodybuilder does day in to day out, like, we're talking waking up and eating every single 2 hours, like, not a small meal. And that sounds fun to some of you right now, I'm sure, but try to eat like a bodybuilder for a day, and you're going to be like, fuck this. Like, just try to get 5,000 calories in of rice and chicken alone. It's awful. And they do that every 2 hours, and then they train with insane intensity. Like, the supersets they're doing, like, it's just insane. So they do that, and then they do that for 10 years nonstop. They don't miss a day. That's why they look the way they do. It's not the drugs. Because there's a lot of guys at your local gym, you go in there and they're on more gear than the bodybuilders, and they barely look like they lift. I was one of those guys. And I'm being like, I obviously looked like I lifted, but I wasn't looking like them, That's just my rant of the day.
No, absolutely. And I mean, man, the thing too is and even like on the CrossFit side of it, I mean, you know how hard those guys train at the top level, not, just or I guess to juxtapose with the bodybuilder. I mean, it's just a different style, but I mean, day in and day out, I've watched ton of Rich's old stuff when he was a world champion. I mean, and dude, it's like all day double sessions, waking up in the morning, you've got, a high intensity aerobic efforts combined with big max lifts. I mean, just crazy types of volume and training that most people would never put themselves through, that even if there was some performance enhancing there, like that doesn't make that any easier. Really, at
No.
that point, it is just to aid in recovery. And there are guys who are just genetic outliers, and that sucks for us as the layman that could never get to that. But at the same time, I think it's pretty cool to know that there are people that just are genetically capable of getting to that level. And also this is something I preach to guys all the time is, most of the time there's such a backlog of work there that you don't even see, like, just of years that have built that fitness or that physique. I got into really fitness when I was 15 years old, and I'm 27 now. And that's the first thing when anybody asks me, like, what do you do? I'm like, consistency. I've been doing this for 12 years, and that's the only reason that I look like I do. If you had started 12 years ago, I promise you, you would have a physique probably that you were very happy with. And then you your body adapts to that. It's much easier for you to keep that around for years going forward. I feel like it's kind of in a way like building up a business, and then you can let it go on autopilot so much, if you will, like you've
Yeah.
done the work to be able to do that. So you have to put it in. And so unfortunately, it takes a lot of time and effort, but that's just how it goes. And that's why people, that are at that level end up being world champions, because they're not afraid to
Exactly.
put the work in.
Yeah, exactly. And to the point of like the genetic outliers, like I think that's a harsh reality, but something that people should realize. And I wish I realized sooner. I had a guy come through Merrick yesterday, and he was wanting to do a cycle, and I was like, trying to be as nice as I could, but like he was like, no, I'll never look like the bodybuilders. And I'm like, I would agree. I can see you right now, and like, and I think that that's more of an argument why not to do this. If you're never going to achieve the physique that you're hoping to with these drugs, then why would you even start doing them? And I wish I realized that, because I was doing bodybuilder type drugs, like
Yeah.
cycles that big, and I'd never ever look like that. I mean, if I would have put on, even if I got that big, I wouldn't have made it, because I don't have the insertions, I don't have the flow that they have, and like I just, so why did I waste my time? And then I tell people too, like, when I started, like, I don't know, 23, 24, or whatever, like the human I was then is not the human I am now, 10, 12 years later. Like I couldn't care less about that stuff, like my goals now are like building my bank account, my Roth and my 401k, and like caring for my family, and things like that mean so much more to me, that like I wish I could just go back and be like, man, this is stupid, don't do it. And so I try to impart that on people. Like I know when you're young, you have that mentality of just like, fuck this, like I'm always gonna like this, but like no, you change. And like, I mean, even, if you're 22, think about what you thought about when you were 12, and if it was like Pokemon and stuff and you no longer have any interest in that, that's probably going to occur again when you're 30. And I'm sure now that I'm, about to be 35, when I'm 45, I'm sure I'll have a different opinion of what I have, like now. And so I try to be mindful of that too. Like if I'm going to get crazy about something and it could be potentially detrimental for my health, like think about it long term. Like, am I really going to love this for decades in the future enough to sacrifice health right now? Maybe not.
Yeah, exactly. And man, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. And that's, I mean, gosh, just like me, if I could go back to myself at, 20 years old and be like, hey, man, sure, you've got good genetics for this. Like everyone's telling you, like, take that next step. Just don't do it. Like you can still do this recreationally and have a great physique, but you're not going to make a career out of this. So why even start going down that road? Because now it's become a lifelong commitment for guys like you and I. And, it's not the end of the world. We do what we can to, obviously mitigate any issues of things when we were pushing the envelope and keep ourselves healthy now. But I don't love having to jab myself every week.
I was going to say that too.
It stinks, knowing that when my wife and I want to try and have kids here in a couple years, I'm going to have to do the whole, fertility protocol and, the steps that takes. And just like, if I could
I hope
save,
it even works.
Exactly, exactly. And if I could, save any guy through going the trouble or, basically kind of be the elder in the room of, just 10 years down the road, like, hey man, I promise you it's not worth it unless you are just that, 0.01% of people that maybe needs this to just take it to that next level to be a world champion in whatever you're doing. But really, to me, the long term, pros definitely, or the cons definitely outweigh the pros for 99% of people when it comes to using anything. So,
Yeah. And I would say exhaust every single other modality first before having to do something that is like that absolute. And like
absolutely.
it sucks because like, that's what I'll tell like, clients, things that come through who want to, do something. They're like, I want to try TRT. And I'm like, okay, it's not try. Like you don't try. And I wish you could. Like if I could change something in the world, that would be one of them. It would be like, let's just let people use testosterone for a few weeks or whatever, see what it's like.
Because
Because a
then
lot
they'd
of
realize it maybe doesn't make that big of a difference.
100%.
Yeah.
I wish I could impart that because same going back to like, being in CrossFit, like I was training really fucking hard and I really wanted to be like something great and I was decent. But I would do a ton of drugs and my nothing got that much better, because I wasn't changing a lot of the work. And the funny part is like had there been no drugs, but I just pushed a little bit harder and I pushed like Froning or Fraser or Kalipo or Nick Bear, I probably would have seen the results without the drugs. But like, if you take if you're not having a good time in your life, you're not enjoying waking up early, you're not enjoying going to the gym, you've got relationship problems, you're not sleeping well, your diet's not good, and you start jabbing in, and especially just TRT, which is bringing you a normal physiologic range, it's not going to change a goddamn thing. Like nothing. Maybe for the first few weeks, you're going to have a placebo. And my hope is always that like that placebo is enough to get the ball rolling and you start making lifestyle changes. But it's funny because the results you're going to get are probably more from the lifestyle changes that you've made thinking that it was the testosterone than it actually was the testosterone. And so like I wish we could impart that on people, like do the lifestyle stuff first. And then if you've checked every single box, I mean, actually check them off and not lying to yourself about checking. Because I'm one that lied to myself, I'm training like Rich Froning, I'm not making his gains. Bullshit. No, I wasn't. Like when I look back, there was many times that I stopped when it hurt and I could have kept pushing, like, oh, I'm on 15 overhead presses in and my delts are burning. I'm going to drop the bar right now. Rich wouldn't have dropped the bar. He would have done 10 more and then he would have kept moving and I dropped the bar. And I'm like, I knew I could have held onto the bar, but instead I decided, no, I think maybe if I injected a little bit more of something, I'll be able to push more. But guess what? When it hurt, I dropped the bar still. I just had, I just had more shit in my body causing more inflammatory issues and higher blood pressure and all the negative things, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, and I love that because I mean, man, that's one thing that I think most guys miss too. I mean, just when they come in with the basic, like I want to get bigger, thinking hormones are going to be the next best thing, or what can I add, even if it's not hormones, what can I take? What should I do? This, that, and the other. Like probably train harder. Like you and I've seen how most people train, and like not saying that you have to train like a freak to be healthy. Like there are different ends of the spectrum. But if you really want to, kind of go the more extreme route and have a, really solid physique, like that takes so much intensity over a long
Yes.
period of time. And I don't think most people have ever really even learned how to train that intensely. And I was super lucky at a young age. Shout out to my old trainer, Jesse Leva, who I, basically met when I was 15, 16 years old and actually taught me how to like, all right, this is what it feels like to actually push to that level of like failure and, getting done at the end of the workout and be like, oh my gosh, I feel like I can't even move. And like, most people have never pushed to that level before. And it's like, I promise you, adding drugs into that equation is not going to help that. If anything, it's going to make it worse for you. And just like you were saying, we were talking about with young guys too. I mean, I always thing that I worry about now is like, what are you doing at 20, 21 years old once you're going into super physiological levels of hormones? Like, what's that doing to you mentally? Is that changing anything that probably shouldn't have been? You haven't even fully developed, they say, until you're 25. So it's like there's a lot of stuff that we don't even necessarily know, maybe from a neurological standpoint, that's
Yeah.
going on there that could affect you downstream. I mean, and I even think about when I was really pushing the envelope and taking high dosages of stuff, like it made me a different person. I know everybody likes
Yeah.
to harp on the, oh, roid rage isn't a thing, it makes you more of what you are. But no, like it definitely affected my decision making and, my
100%.
outlook. And that's
Yeah.
just things that I don't think people like to talk about. And you probably don't notice it so much when it's happening directly to you because you've gotten used to it. But now being removed from it, I'm like, I was very much a different person when
Yeah. I wanted to talk to Fuad about that, but we didn't get to it because I feel like now we're talking more about blood pressure and kidney health and everything, and that's great. People are neglecting what happens to neurological, brain development. That's something huge. And the reason I actually stopped is because I could feel a cognitive decline. That was really like the impetus that I was like, whoa, something's happening because I just was like, I couldn't string together a sentence very well. And still, I don't have like the verbal articulation and the verbal acuity that I want. And I feel like it's because of that. I'll stutter sometimes, I'll get lost in words. I can't think of a word that I know. And it pisses me off. I feel like it's probably because of all the like oxidative stress that I put my brain through.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's times too, like, I don't know, it's weird. Like when you're doing like a lot of 19 NORs and stuff, like, all of a sudden your freaking Pornhub history starts getting weird, and like you're just like you're into weird stuff. Like there's this like you're getting strange. And I look back and I'm like, that was a weird time, where like, there was a few times when like Victoria and I got in fights and I just like lost it. And I'm like, yeah, that was a trend, like I could tell. And it's not like, I wasn't just raging all the time, but things definitely made me react differently than I otherwise would. But yeah, that mental decline is what really scared me. I was like, I'm only in my 30s and I'm already lost for words. And actually, my visual appearance started really looking bad too. Like when I started pushing the envelope really hard on the food and the growth hormone and everything and actually trying to grow, I was like looking in the mirror, like, I just got so many wrinkles in the past 6 months. Like I'm like, whoa, I never thought like I was going to age. I always thought I looked younger. And so those two, I mean, the looking thing was a vanity thing to me, but the brain stuff scared me. As a doctor, I want to be mentally, acute and there, and I wasn't. And so, yeah, that's something that I'm super passionate about too, that we don't even like consider. Like
Absolutely.
testosterone is pretty toxic to our brain.
Mhm.
Like the protective attributes of testosterone are like really come through estrogen. That's
Yeah.
another thing that people don't understand is like, like I don't know if people believe in God or evolution or whatever, but I'm always like, doesn't it make sense that like estrogen comes from testosterone and like, our bodies are very smart. Like all of the negative things that testosterone does is pretty much like countered by estrogen. And the fact that people want to like crush estrogen all the time is just crazy because I'm like, dude, testosterone's pretty neurotoxic. Estrogen's neuroprotective. You equal yourself out there. Same with the cardiac, same with like libido, like everything. Like estrogen helps keep everything in line.
Yeah.
That's his little side tangent. But yeah, it's funny because people come in wanting low estrogen, high testosterone.
Yep. And no, and that's actually the point that I was going to make before you even said it, that, expect just talking about hormones obviously will have, neurologically give you side effects. That's, just on a smaller note, the estrogen is the biggest thing that I had issues with when I was competing, just trying to crush it, taking tons of aromatase inhibitors, thinking, because back in the day, again, on the forums, it was like, oh, you need no estrogen to be as dry as possible. Now
Yeah.
we know actually that hinders muscle gain and actually can make you fatter when it's too low, which, back in the day, nobody would ever talk about. But I mean, gosh, when I think about like mood swings and stuff like that that I ever dealt with, it was always when my estrogen was crushed and, into the ground. And, just even I always try and use the example of like a postmenopausal woman. Why do you think they have so many issues? Because
Exactly.
hormones have been depleted. They do not feel like themselves. Like their emotions are all over the place. Obviously, having some neurological issues. So you're very naive to think that you're not going to have some by either crushing one hormone like that or taking tons of exogenous forms that aren't even bioidentical to your own body anyway.
Yeah,
So
exactly. I always tell people like women have way less cardiovascular disease than men until they hit menopause, and then they equal out. Like, duh, there's an obvious reason there.
yeah, yeah,
Estrogen is super protective. I
yeah.
think I'm lucky in the fact that like I almost never did any like AIs. I don't know why. I think early on there was people like Jason Blaha. Did you ever follow him by chance?
Yeah, that's funny,
Yeah.
man. Gosh,
Yeah.
all the OGs on
Blast from
YouTube.
the past. Yeah, Jason Blaha was like one of the first like true like people talking about steroids and
Yeah.
dropping some actual knowledge, which was cool. Because like yeah, I started doing like more of a blast and cruise because of him, which I think is still good. I mean, I would if I could go back, I wouldn't have done anything. But I'm glad that I didn't do crazy cycles and then use a ton of like female hormone or like anti-cancer drugs and things, you know, to recover. But yeah, I learned that from him basically. Like you don't need an AI. Like estrogen is super protective and helps strength. I think more back then he was talking about the benefits on strength and mass, and that's all I cared about. If he told me it was good for my heart and my head, I would have been like, yeah, who cares? But
Yep.
yeah, I think I'm lucky in that I never crushed estrogen too much. I would have like maybe a bottle of anastrozole that would last me like a year. Every now and then I would take it if I thought I'm fluffy, and I would take it, which was stupid. Stupid,
Yep.
but
I should have been hanging around you then, man. Yeah, I use them way too often. And it really took me a while to like realize like, man, why I can't get my libido in check. Things always feel like it's an up and down. And now looking back, I'm like, man, it was always that. And then yeah, I know even for a lot of our patients that come through Merrick that are on TRT, like it is very few and far between that we even use aromatase inhibitors with people,
yeah,
right? Because it's like, again, like we were talking about, your body, when it's a bioidentical hormone, knows what to do with testosterone. It's going to take a portion of that and convert however much it feels you need into estradiol and estrone and the other variants of estrogen to counterbalance that.
yeah,
And it's very rare that you need to disrupt that in any manner. I mean, I pretty much never, even if mine's a little out of range, I never worry about it. It's all
no,
about how I'm feeling. And like we've always talked about too, even your blood work is such a snapshot in time. I mean, we see people come back with testosterone levels, estrogen levels, at one point, and then 3 months later, and they're not even on hormones, and it's drastically different. Same type of day, fasting in the morning. There's just so many things that, just because you see it one day on paper, it's like, oh, I don't need to start taking something for that.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I try to tell people that all the time. And I know people like love to hate on Western medicine and everything, but if you go to an endocrinologist and they test you and they see that your testosterone is low one time, they're not going to do anything about it. What they're going to do is have you repeat that test a series of times, like at least 2 additional times at the same exact time under the same variables, and try to see if you do have an actual low level. Because one time only, like people need to realize hormones are changing, they're fluctuating minute to minute. Like they could literally draw your blood probably an hour later and get completely different readings on hormones, because these are things that are pulsatile. They have fluctuations, they go based on daytime, so like just seeing one lab of, oh my god, my testosterone's 300, well, that doesn't mean it's always 300. And so we can start taking lifestyle steps to make sure that we are like, enhancing your ability to produce and utilize testosterone better. But you shouldn't change and jump straight to the nuclear option of TRT based on just one reading alone. Because you might regret it. I mean, I recently, and I showed you this guy's labs, we got a guy who got a 300, and then luckily to him, the LabCorp, the agency we use, messed up a lot of his other labs, and so we didn't want to make any rash decisions until repeating labs and making sure that we got the full profile. So his original 300 testosterone, when he got labs again a few weeks later, came back high 600s or low 700s or something like that. So it was like a 400-point discrepancy, and I'm sure that occurs a lot. And I think that these TRT clinics are doing a disservice to people just putting them straight on testosterone. I mean, they probably don't need it, especially if you're just going to go on testosterone to get to a 600 or 700. It's just not always worth it. For the 45-year-old guy who's doing everything right and his body's just declining, and you're wanting to fight against biology, sure, I totally understand that. For the 25-year-old guy who had one reading of 300, let's try other things first, would be my opinion.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And even talking about, I guess, the actual number, for everyone that thinks you need a testosterone of like 1,000 or 1,100 to feel a certain type of way, Adam and I can both tell you, like most of the time I feel better at like a 6 to 700, like that is not a low level. And if that's
Mhm.
naturally where you're at, that is phenomenal. I mean, even for my TRT now, I take less than 100 milligrams a week because that's what keeps me
Me
around
too.
6 to 700. I feel very even keel at that level. My recovery's great. My mood is good. Libido's awesome. Anything over that, I feel like my body's kind of like, this is a little too much. Like I'm just in that, super sympathetic, driven state at all times. I can't wind down. And so, yeah, it's just, you do not need this super high test level to
No.
make your life that much better. If anything, your body feels much more comfortable, kind of in an even keel level of 6 to 700, I would say.
Yeah. I'm not, I maybe take 80,
Yeah,
maybe 100 at most now, which
yeah,
is,
yeah.
less than most TRT protocols. A lot of them are starting at 120. Some are like 150. I see people coming to us from other clinics on over 200, which is just like insane to me. And
A
I don't
cycle,
think it really makes
basically.
like a difference because I'll tell people like I have like, this experience to where I've had everything from probably 300 to like 5,000. I
Hmm.
can't tell a lot of difference between them. Like when I got in those insanely high ranges, the one thing that I could always feel, I guess, would be libido kind of.
Hmm.
Um, and I know that sounds very exciting for people, but this was libido that got me in trouble like a lot. Like, it was something that I couldn't have that libido now as a professional that I am because I love the fact that I don't want to screw everything that walks because I can focus and I can work for 12 hours a day and it's a good thing. And this point, like I don't watch porn. I don't think it has any utility in my life. Like I have a very loving like relationship with my wife that I enjoy and I like that. But when I had those insanely high levels, like it was almost deviant, like I needed to be doing things multiple times a day.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't helping me in my fitness. It wasn't helping me in my physique. It was kind of screwing up my life in other areas. I was like cheating on girls and just being a bad human being because of not, I mean, I shouldn't put it all in that. It was me too. But it kind of made things worse in that regard. My libido right now is very healthy. It's very normal. And that's another thing too. Like I'll tell guys, they'll be like, my libido's changing. I'm like, dude, you're also 35, like we're mature now. We care about
Yes,
other things,
yes,
like you
exactly.
have a wife, you have kids, like it makes sense that you don't want to just like bend her over every time she walks by. Like you care about her as a human being, like it's okay. You still there? Oh, you lagged.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, good.
And then like the erection one's funny too. Like they'll be like, I don't get morning erections. And I'm like, are you sure? Like, are you putting a cuff around your penis and measuring? Because I mean, like in a lab, that's how it would be studied. You put like a
Yep,
small blood pressure
yep,
cuff around it, and it's like the word morning erection is more of like slang because it's actually nocturnal erections because they
yes,
occur while we're sleeping, and so you can't know if you're not getting morning woods. Like sometimes you wake up and you're hard because you were in that period, but it's like it's not right when you wake up it gets hard, and that's a morning
yes,
erection. If you don't have it,
yes.
you have low testosterone. That's not the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you wake up during your REM sleep cycle, sure, maybe you're going to, or if just something as simple, if you need to use the bathroom when you get up,
Yeah.
sometimes that can contribute to it also. And I love that you're going down this road because I very much agree with you that, to a lot of guys, they hear like oh man, if, my levels get that high, I'm just going to want to have sex all the time. And it's like, man, it's detrimental for you. Like if
It
you
is.
really do want to be productive and be focused on your career, and I mean, to your point too, like being faithful. I've always thought that, and that's actually something I've seen with a lot of guys that are older that get on TRT. If they get thrown on just by some clinic at, super high levels, like infidelity starts creeping in their relationship. And it's like, hey, like that probably contributes to it a little bit because the neurological side effects there, or they're going after something that they probably wouldn't. They're not just at a healthy level of libido. Again, now they're reaching for something that, they're never going to be able to even get at home because it's not even normal in that sense. It's not
Exactly.
how it's supposed to be. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, when you're 16 to 20, sure, you feel that way. And it's the period in your life where you do want to at all times. But that's biologically probably set to be that way. That then as you
Exactly.
start to age, you're not going to feel that way anymore, because then you're focused on providing for your family, and all the different things that come as we age,
Yeah.
not just being a horny 19-year-old anymore. Like, there's a reason that's a very short period in your life, because you wouldn't get shit done if it was like that.
Exactly. Yeah. And it sounds boring to like be like, monogamy, like, stay with one person and build this relationship. But like that stuff matters as we age. Like, a single individual is going to die way sooner than somebody who has a partnership. And like
Absolutely.
when you look at that graph, that I forget the study that came out recently of like who you spend most of your life with, and like in the beginning, it's like your family, and then eventually you don't spend time with your family, and most of it's like a spouse, and you don't want to screw that shit up, especially not just because you're chasing bigger biceps. Like,
Yeah.
your wife, or she's gonna love you anyways. Like, look at all the fat dudes out there with gorgeous wives. Like, women are awesome. They're gonna love us despite what we look like. They're not as shallow as we are. And
Yes,
so, like,
yes.
don't let like chasing a physique ruin a really special thing, because you don't want to be 70, 80, alone. It's going to be terrible, and you're likely going to die of depression, and it's going to, it's going to suck. So we're getting kind of off on a tangent there, but I think that, that stuff's important, and that's another thing is I'll talk about, like, that's one of those boxes we need to check too. Like, do you have a relationship?
Yep.
And we don't have to put certain like a definition on what a good relationship is. You can have whatever that is that makes sense to you. I don't care if you're a polygamist or gay, trans, bi, whatever, but do you have a relationship that fulfills you as an individual? If not, maybe find that too. Like, do you have a social community that fulfills you? Do you have spiritual ideas and feelings that fulfill you? Because all of these things matter, and psychological stuff is going to trump biology 10 times out of 10, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Because you can have 3,000 testosterone, you can have Cialis and Viagra in, and if you get caught up in your head about this girl's so hot and my dick's too small, it's never going to work. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep.
Like, that's another one that we get all the time. And I'm like, dude, I have been there. They're like, I don't know, my testosterone looks good. I'm taking Cialis, I'm taking Viagra. Like, and then when I get with new girls, I can't get it up. I'm like, yeah, because your brain is so much stronger than your hormones. Like,
And you're thinking about it
exactly.
24/7. Yep.
And so, like, if you're having issues with erection quality, like actual like erection or even libido, like, instead of thinking about drugs and stuff, maybe go see a therapist or like talk to somebody and find some tools to work through that, because that's going to be way more important. Because like I said, I've been in times when I've had a ton of drugs in my system and it didn't work, because I was sitting there thinking like, shoot, this is my first time with this girl. She's really hot. I hope I prove it out. Like, I hope I can perform. Is she, what she think? Do my abs look good enough? Like, I'm
Yep.
thinking so many stupid things that it goes
Yep.
limp.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, back to your original point, now I want to go down to tangent of like where I think a lot of the sexual issues maybe come for guys nowadays. I know it is kind of boring, finding a good partner and all that to people, but man, I mean, it's so true. I think especially for men, like having a strong woman by your side, like really like levels us in a way. I know when I met my wife, things like really changed for me. A lot of the decisions and things that I would have made before, it was like, oh, wait, okay, like this is how it's supposed to go. This is why, for millions of years we're meant to find a partner and carry on and raise a family and do all that. Like, as a human, you feel happiest when you're that way. And
You
I feel
do.
like the culture now is so they preach so much to young men as far as what we see on social media constantly, just that now that's not cool. Like, go out and, slay as many girls as you can, this, that, and the other. And it's like, sure, man, that looks cool. And I understand it maybe gets you a lot of followers and makes you look like a hot shot, but it's super unfulfilling. And having, somebody who's kind of your rock there is the best feeling in the world, knowing that you're coming home to that every
It
day.
is.
They've got your back. And yeah, it's something that I wish was definitely talked about more often. So
And yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, I grind insanely hard right now in my life, like my work, and it's all for like Victoria and the family that we're building. Like, and it's so fulfilling to me. Like, nothing has
yes,
ever felt so damn good. Like,
yes,
I've, I've had great performance. I've been the shit at the gym. I've had guys look at me and want to be like me. I've crush CrossFit competitions where people are like, damn, you're good. Nothing's felt as good as like just knowing that I am being like a breadwinner for my family and taking care of my family. And that doesn't mean that she's just, at home cleaning stuff. She has her own career and she's awesome too. But it's just like, as a man, I feel good being that person, being that provider, and having somebody who loves me and loving somebody and taking care of them. Like that is like the best PED there is, 100%.
Absolutely.
And I don't think
Absolutely.
guys are finding that these days. I
Yep.
mean, there's
It-
like, you look at our grandparents, even our parents, like those, they weren't shooting themselves up with gear, and those were fucking manly men. And people always harp on the testosterone's dropping, blah blah blah. Like, maybe it is, but a lot of other things are changing too. And like, our mindsets are changing a lot, unfortunately, as well. Like, we don't have the mindsets that our grandparents did.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh man, I mean, and to use my dad as an example, like I always just kind of look at him, I'm like, man, you're a dying breed. Like, I mean, just such a hard-nosed guy. I mean, built everything in our house from the,
Mine
time that I
too.
was a kid. And, I wish I had learned more from him because I was a kid who didn't want to. I just
Same.
wanted to go play with my friends, and now, not mechanically inclined at all. But yeah, man, I look at that and I'm like, yeah, it's just a dying breed of people. But I think nothing feels more fulfilling the more, I guess, responsibility you take on, and the becoming more selfless in that aspect, right? That, like, as you were saying, everything I'm doing is not just solely for me. So people say, "Ooh, look at Adam," or "Look at
Yeah.
Josh, is what he's doing." Like, no, it's for me and my future family that I'm building. I'm making sacrifices and working every day so that when I do bring a child into this world, and they're get to schooling age and all that, like, I can give them everything that my parents gave me.
Mhm.
And to me, there's got to be no better feeling for that. I even, talk about that with my parents now, and thankfully raised, two great kids, and my sister and I, and we, got out of the nest, have done our thing. And, they always just harp on how awesome that is for them. Like, man, like that's probably what it's really all about long
Yeah,
term. So,
it's cool. I mean, it's cool. Like, how old are you again, Josh?
27.
Yeah, so you're experiencing this younger than I did. Like, it took me until probably, honestly, a year or two ago before I started feeling this way. And that's probably because of the freaking drugs were in my system and
We can blame the
convoluting.
trend like everything else, right?
Exactly. But like, it's like, I just got excited hearing you talk about it. And so like, I know that guys will probably listen to this and be like, God, this is so fucking cheesy, blah, blah, I want to sleep pussy. And like, I feel you, I do. But like,
Yeah.
it's really weird, like the joy that conversation just brings me now. I'm just like,
Yep.
hell yeah. Like, I don't know. And like I said, there's nothing. And I think these days, men, and I don't want to get too like political, but men, the idea of a man is definitely being suppressed more and more. And like, just feeling that actual what it feels like to be a man, and not just like, I know when you're getting big biceps and delts and you're pulling girls, you feel like a man, but it's not really what a man is. When you actually do develop that role as a man, where you're, the head of the family and you protect people and people rely on you, like, it's a really cool feeling. It's a cool
Absolutely.
feeling. And yeah, so I would, if you're not there yet, like, just think about, like, one day you probably will be, and make decisions now for your future self.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's totally normal for that to feel scary too. I think for a lot of guys, like that's something they don't love to talk about, but just the idea of like basically becoming more selfless, and like I'm gonna have to stop only wanting to do things that give me pleasure, go out and chase girls. I mean, even with my wife now, when I first met her, like I always think that guys, when they find that girl, even kind of go through that little just, existential crisis of like,
Yeah.
oh, is this going to be it? I can't talk to other girls anymore, blah blah blah. And like just getting over that and realizing like, no man, this is how it's supposed to be. This is an awesome thing that you found this. Like, don't fight your body, or your body wanting to, move into this next phase of life,
Right.
because it's normal, and it's going to be awesome when you get there. And when you do, you're going to look back and be like, why the heck was I ever concerned with any of
I
that?
know. I used to think like, oh, it's bullshit. Like, marriage is a social construct. Like,
Yes.
like, this is just what society tells me. And like, okay, even if maybe it is, but like, our society is built that way. And if you want to like succeed in this world, like, you're gonna have to like, it makes sense. I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I went to school with a lot of like LDS Mormon people, and they were very fulfilled and very, very happy. And they all, like, their biggest thing, despite like a lot of the things that that I don't agree with on them. Their biggest thing is always family, and they're always highly successful because of that. I think because of that core in their family.
Absolutely.
And so, like, I mean, I had a good friend who left the church when we were in med school, and he was like, he was scared. Him and his wife were scared because they were like, we don't want to lose family through this, like, leaving. But then they realized, like, we don't need the church and everything to still have that. And they took those values with them, left everything else that they didn't agree with, but they took those values and they're thriving. And because they have that background of like family first, and like, they have a beautiful son together now, and he's crushing it. So is she. And yeah, it just, I used to kind of disagree with it all, but now I'm just like, no, it makes sense. And I mean, even if you look back, like you said, like, our genes are literally telling us to do this. Like, there's something within me telling me to, like, quit playing around and just, like, focus, because now I'm to that age where I need to protect. And so it's like not even that social of a thing, it's a biological thing within me. My genes wanted to procreate all those years before and get as many seeds out as I could, and now they're slowing down and telling me protect and guide and give. And yeah, so follow both genes in society and you'll do much better.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, and I think I know it kind of off on a tangent here, but I think it's great we chat about this stuff because, it's something we focus on at Merrick of like, hey, we're not just trying to help you out here, like, on a sheet of paper, get your blood work in order. Like, it's your health and wellness comes from so many aspects in your life. And, just maybe shifting your mindset on how you view things could totally, put this cascade of events in motion for things going forward, getting your health in order, getting a better body, finding a good partner, all those things. So I think it's super important and something that probably gets lost in the weeds
Yeah,
a lot of the times. And I think it's just everyone's so desensitized now by just being, like we talk about all the time too, just it's an onslaught of stimulation coming at you at all times. And like really just taking a step back and like focusing on what's in front of you. What can I do to my day to day? Like, I know some people's jobs aren't their dream jobs, but like still take pride in that. Like,
right.
just be excited that like you get the chance to, wake up, go make money for yourself, further your career, whatever it may be. Like, take some pride in that and like try and find joy and happiness and just those little small things that most of us kind of, I guess, grumble about on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly. Well, I think that's probably a good place to end for this time around. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, this is what we really want to promote through Merrick. And this isn't a Merrick podcast, obviously, but we both are very passionate about our places at Merrick. And, we only get small windows of time with people who come through, and I wish that I could sit down and talk to them, each client I have, for over an hour like this, about conversations like this, because this is vitally important. And people like Josh, as a PCC and a health coach, do that on the back end. But this is hopefully, moving forward, going to be a time where we can talk about stuff like this, and you guys, the listeners, can listen and kind of hear our in-depth thoughts about stuff, and our bantering and BSing, and hopefully get some cool guests on too to hear their side of things and impart some knowledge on you as well. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Any final words, Josh?
No, that's it, man. Thanks for
All right.
this. I'm excited to keep this rolling. And yeah, anything I guess positive that we can give back to people through this is going to be a win.
Absolutely. Cool, man. Well, see you guys next time.